So I guess what I'm hearing you say is that if you're a negotiator,
Yes.
it's probably best not to deal with the media. However, if you need to deal with the media, you should be exceptionally well prepared, know the ins and outs in terms of the message that you want to deliver, and it shouldn't be left to chance.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Because if you have a professional in the organization who's got to comment on the negotiations, very, very important.
Yeah.
I remember speaking with Buzz Hargrove in terms of the media, and that was his take. He thinks the media is pretty important, but you have to craft your message and be well prepared in terms of delivering that message if you're commenting on a negotiations that's stalled, has gone into the ditch, or has been successful. You need to be very, very well prepared.
It's the most important thing you said, those two words, well prepared. My experience watching successful people, and you watch them, and you might take for granted that they don't work hard, whatever, they're just smart, whatever, they're well prepared. Buzz Hargrove, who I didn't know till I met him as a distinguished visiting professor, when I watched him, and I opposed most of what he was doing because he comes from a different political persuasion, but he was well prepared. And so those two words, in anything you do, well prepared. I learned something. Well, here, well prepared. I'm going to take that to my next life, whatever that may be.
Tell me, in your experience, have you ever had to deal with people on the other side who were deceptive or difficult in negotiations, and how have you dealt with them?
Yeah, a lot, more than you would like. And again, it's something that you have to be smarter than them, because sometimes they're so difficult, they're so deceptive, that you want to go and strangle the guy. And I'm trying not to swear because I see a camera here, but I mean, sometimes you just want to really let them know what you think. But a good negotiator will calmly think about, okay, I'm going to file that away. I got to deal with them. I got to say, I disagree. You've said that, and I don't agree, in a calm way. I've periodically lost it with a deceptive person, but it's been because I wanted to. It's been part of a strategy to say, this guy's gone over the line, and we got to let him know, whatever. And but it's again, I'm in control. But you see deceptive.
What was the outcome?
What's happened, unfortunately, more than once. Most of the time, you'll get back to where you wanted to get. I've not seen it. Oh, I've seen one in particular where the other side walked out of the room, and my client panics, says, "What did you do here?" And I knew what I was doing because I knew, again, in preparation, they had to do the deal, and the deal on the table was a very fair deal. So I knew that I could push. So the lawyer on the other side grandstanded a little. They came back, and we got to it.
So it was a part of your strategy?
It was part, but it was a part of the strategy that came up sort of on the spot. I hadn't thought about it before, but when you've got deceptive people on the other side, that you just have to be careful and deal with them differently than the people that you've dealt with and trust and are fair.
I think you make a very important point that these deceptive individuals who may be at the negotiating table, you have to call them out. Sometimes you're firm, sometimes you're very, very polite and very courteous, but nevertheless you still have to
you got to
call
deal
them
with
out.
it. You have to deal with it. You just have to figure out what's the best way to deal with it, because if you come on too strong, you may need them on another issue down the road. So you got to let them know that you've caught them. Not embarrass them with the client, because So it's a balancing act as to how you deal with it.
Have you ever called, say for instance, a break in the negotiations to deal with the other lawyer on the other side who's being very deceptive? Has that ever happened to you?
Yes, we've got to take timeouts and figure out how to deal with it, and many times clients have a relationship, whatever, and they can solve it. Sometimes you get into a game where the lawyer on the other side is trying to put on a show for his client.
Do lawyers do that?
Yeah, they do. And sometimes it's unfortunate because it can mess up a deal. Not a lot, but you've seen it. and you know, you have to figure out how to deal with it and deal with your client, but it does happen.
What does the client think when you do these kinds of things? You call someone out. Do they question you as to why you do this? Is it effective?
Well, there's nothing, you know, it varies from situation to situation. So sometimes you have a separate meeting with a client and they've asked you, what did you do? Why were you doing that? And you explain what the strategy is. Most of the time my clients are better negotiators than I am, are very smart. The reason they're successful businessmen is they're very smart, very hardworking, good negotiators, think they know more than I do and probably do. So they're pretty astute people that I've been dealing with for my career.
I think you're pretty modest here. I think your clients may be very smart, but the Ralph Lean that I know is a pretty astute gentleman when it comes to negotiating various deals and various arrangements.
Can I quote you? There's a camera. I mean, this is spectacular. Dingwall had good comments to say.
Tell us a little bit about from where you sit, and you've been in many, many different circumstances. What are some of the good qualities of a top-notch negotiator?
Best, again, it's preparedness. Someone that really, really knows the facts of that situation, every which way, knows the business of the client, understands their client, understands the client on the other side, how far they're willing to go, how badly the deal is needed by both sides, understands the lawyer on the other side, what it takes to get him to move. So again, it goes back to well-preparedness. Be really prepared. Don't just show up. And I've not seen any good lawyer in my experience that isn't well prepared. I remember even as an articling student, watching litigators, because most of what you did as an articling student is you would go to court with really top litigators and guys with like amazing reputations. And what people didn't know is how hard they worked preparing for the trial. So preparing for a negotiation is really important.
But how would you find out about the other side?
Combination of things. Number one, many times you're dealing with public companies. You can do your own due diligence, phone around. Your client will be very, very helpful because many times you're doing a merger with people in the same business. So there's lots of ways to find out. And in public company situations, you know the financial statements. You know this company really needs to sell.
And would you call and ascertain as to the reputation of the person on the other side with some of your friends
Sure.
and some of your colleagues?
Sure, you do. That's one of the due diligence you and your team do, is learn everything you can. Again, you got to be careful because you don't want the other side knowing you're checking them out. So what's going on here? You're checking me out, whatever. But you know, your client will, and most of the time your client will know more about the other side because they're
living it.
They live it. They're in business with them. They know them. So they do a lot of the heavy lifting in that issue.
So that really comes back, though, in terms of your due diligence, your contacts, your networking can be very helpful.
Yeah, very useful. I mean, I think part of the reason people hire me, I thought it was clearly not because I'm a good-looking young guy, but I mean, I think part of it is my judgment. They trust, but people believe that my network of contacts can be very valuable to the whole process, and it has been over the years where I've been able to gather information that other people couldn't get just because I have a network of people to call and find out what I have to find out.
Because, you know, in dealing with the other side, whether it's a publicly traded company, I mean, you get certain information on the web in terms of the financials and the strategic plan and the objectives. But having the network to add color and insights, I think would be very, very important in terms of
very, very valuable. You know, there's all kinds of little pieces that people take for granted in negotiation, and intelligence is one that you might take for granted, but might turn a deal if you know something that, and you've done your homework on it.
Now, over the years, you've met many, many different negotiators. Who comes to mind, that top negotiator from your perspective? You mentioned Biddle.
Bitove, John Bitove. You obviously weren't here in Toronto. You were in the Maritimes or something. The Raptors, 1995, when we came, young guy. And some of the top people are a lot of them come from the sports world. I've done a lot of sports law and a lot of interesting people. One, I acted for Donald Trump when he came into Ontario in 1995, wanting to build a casino. And Niagara Falls government was doing an RFP to see who would buy. So I got to meet him and watch him. And this was 95. Trump wasn't as big as he is today. He was having some real estate problems, but he was a confident guy. Boy, was he confident. He knew what he wanted. I watched him in action, and what you see on TV is what you get. But another word I thought about this morning as I was coming over here was confidence. Good negotiators have real confidence in their ability. So he was one. Before your time, I acted for a guy, in the 80s, was the owner of the Edmonton Oilers hockey team, Peter Pocklington.
You acted for Peter Pocklington?
I acted for Peter Pocklington in the 80s. He's a guy from Ontario, goes out to BC, goes out to Alberta, makes money, bought the Edmonton Oilers, signed Wayne Gretzky, wins 5 Stanley Cups, traded Wayne Gretzky. And I watched Peter in action over the years. In one particular one, he owned a canola company called Canberra Foods in Lethbridge, Alberta. And he led the union negotiations. And he was terrific. He was terrific. He's ended up with some problems later on, but he was a personally really good negotiator. And I've watched some of the...
What jumped out about Peter Pocklington?
He was just confident. He just was in your face, whatever, and he knew what he wanted, and ended up, I watched, he made a very fair labor deal, told the board he was going to lead the negotiations, and he did. Edmonton hockey team, he was the owner, they won 5 Stanley Cups. I mean, they were in the 80s. I spent a lot of time with them. They had Gretzky and Messier and Paul Coffey, and like unbelievable hockey. I mean, I got to meet his coach at the time, Glenn Sather, who's again from the hockey business, a really good negotiator, really smart guy.
So you're attributing, if you look at Trump, Pocklington, Sather, confidence. Confidence in what they know and how they deliver it, is it?
Yeah. All different, totally different guys, but those 3 were good. Many of my existing clients I act for now, whose names you wouldn't have heard, are very, very good negotiators. My client owns a company called Cargojet, A.J. Vermani, Canada's largest air cargo business. He started 10 years ago, built up. He's a very smart negotiator. Naveen Chandaria, another one of my clients, started an artificial log business in 83 or 84. Smart negotiator.
Where's Brian Burke in all of this? Former president of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Burke is a very close friend of mine. Just spoke to my Ryerson class. He and Donnie Meehan, an agent, spoke to my undergraduate Ryerson class. I suspect he's a very good negotiator. I happen to like Burke a lot. He's a straight shooting guy who gives back to charity without wanting his name attached to it. Just the Leafs that he's built up, his team. I think he'll do a job in Calgary. A very good negotiator. I'm a great fan.
And how would you assess the negotiating skills of Beeston, Paul Beeston of the Toronto?
Another friend of mine, Beeston, spoke to my Ryerson class as well. Beeston's one of the guys who's my age. We were at Western together. You know that Beeston doesn't use a cell phone or a computer? It makes me like really literate here. You can't get the guy here. Beeston, I think, is probably, of all the people in sports, one of the most likable. I think his likability factor helps with his negotiation, whatever. It'd be tough if he has to, but I mean, he's won 2 Major League Baseball championships, pennants with the Blue Jays. He would be, he's smart, he's an accountant, whatever. He's but he's a very trustworthy guy. You can't help but like him. Of all the people in sports, Beeston is a very likable guy, and that probably helps with his negotiations.
So as we conclude our interview here,
This could go on forever. Why are we concluding it? I mean,
what's your advice or suggestions to young people who are finishing up their degree and wanting to go into the work world? What sorts of advice would you give to these young people that are trying to get a career and move on to have a happy and prosperous adult life?
well, I mean, I wish I brought it. I have my Ralph Lean tips for success, which are ridiculous little things, and I give it to my students. And you know, there are things, as we talked about: always return your phone calls and emails. You know, always be punctual, sign of respect. Listen. People don't listen. Really important to listen to what you're saying and be able to respond. Communication skills, both written and oral, really, really important. Networking, building relationships. Remember what Woody Allen said, 90% of success is showing up. Show up, get involved, do something. Here's one that I teach people: under promise and over deliver.
Could you give me an example of that?
Of under promise and over deliver? It's something that people do the opposite all the time. And you're negotiating a business deal, and you tell the other side that you know, my earnings are that, and I have this many employees, whatever. If you overpromise on these things, and then they get to look at the real numbers and say, boy, this guy's a bad guy, didn't tell me the right information. So just downplay. You got to find, if you're selling something, you want to get the sale, but you know, if you overpromise, it's going to affect your relations. If you underpromise and over-deliver, it's a lesson that you know, I've lived with and followed. These are like simple things. They're not in a textbook. That's why I call them the Ralph Lean rules for. And people will, actually, they once asked me in my Ryerson class, "Do you ever write them down here so that we could?" I said, "No, I don't write them down, but take some notes."
You should. I mean, I think that's very, very important.
No, but there's simple things that you're not going to learn in a textbook. I mean, you're going to learn from people who've had the experience. So I mean, and I try to live by those rules as much as I can. It doesn't always work, but I do try.
Well, on behalf of the Ryerson Negotiation Project and students and professors at the Ted Rogers School of Business, I want to express to you our sincere appreciation for joining us today. You've got a lot of different insights on the negotiation process, and your tips in terms of young people who may be watching the show or will eventually watch the show, I think will be very beneficial. So I want to give you a sincere thank you.
Well, thank you. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.